In the Pokemon TCG, the Lost Zone is a special zone that only a select few cards reference. Any card put into the Lost Zone functionally gets removed from the game. The mechanic rarely gets used in card design, only returned to the game for a few sets every few years. Since the mechanic's use is so rare, whenever the designers behind TCG decide to bring it back, they tend to push the power level on a lot of cards using the Lost Zone. Starting us off at number 10, we have one of the first Lost Zone cards in the game, Palkia G Lv.X. This Pokemon has the Lost Cyclone Pokepower that forces your opponent to put some of their Pokemon and cards attached to them into the Lost Zone. When you use this Pokepower, each player with 4 or more bench Pokemon have to choose 3 of the bench Pokemon to keep, and then puts the rest of the bench Pokemon and all cards attached to them into the Lost Zone. Palkia G Lv.X also has the Hydro Shock attack, costing 2 water and 2 colorless energy to deal 80 damage to any Pokemon in play, discarding 2 energy from itself afterwards. One of the important factors towards this card's viability is how the Lv.X mechanic actually worked. When you put a Lv.X Pokemon over its base card, in this case Palkia G, the Lv.X Pokemon still has the attacks and abilities of the original card. Decks built around Palkia G wanted to control the game while spreading damage with its Pearl Breath attack, which dealt 50 damage to the active Pokemon and 10 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. While Lost Cyclone letting your opponent get rid of damaged Pokemon without giving up prize cards seems a little counterintuitive to the strategy of the deck, it was the ability to clear up your own bench space that made Palkia G Lv.X an inclusion in these types of decks. Palkia G decks slow down the game by taking advantage of Mesprit's Psychic Bind Pokepower. This Pokepower prevents your opponent from using any of their Pokepowers their next turn after you put Mesprit into your bench. With so many Pokepowers that help boost consistency in the format like Uxie's Setup or Claydol's Cosmic Power, having a single card that stopped all of them just by putting it into your bench bought Palkia decks multiple turns of attacks with no worry of your opponent putting up any response. Lost Cyclone ensured that your bench would never run out of space so that you could continue to use Mesprit on your own Uxie to lock out your opponent or continue drawing cards. While Pearl Breath would be the attack most used by Palkia G Lv.X, Hydro Shot dealing 80 damage allowed it to take crucial one-hit KOs against many important Pokemon in the format on a necessary turn. One of the most interesting applications of Palkia G Lv.X was a key piece in one of the first ever combo decks of the Pokemon TCG. When paired with Dialga Lv.X, which had a 25% chance of giving you an extra turn each time you use its Timeskip Pokepower, 2 copies of Seeker, Jirachi, and Drifblim, you were able to end the game over the course of 2 turns regardless of however many prize cards were remaining. Once the turn skip gave you an extra turn, you would use Lost Cyclone to put your opponent down to 3 Pokemon. Then you would play the first Seeker to make each player return 1 of their bench Pokemon to their hand before copying the effect of Jirachi's Detour attack. This will put your opponent on having 1 bench Pokemon going into the extra turn. During your extra turn, you would play the second Seeker to return the last bench Pokemon to the hand. Once your opponent had no more remaining bench Pokemon, you would use Drifblim's Takeaway attack in order to shuffle their active Pokemon into their deck. With your opponent having no Pokemon remaining, you won the game. While this combo deck never saw widespread use, it was a creative application of the Lost Cyclone Pokepower. For having a unique Pokepower that takes advantage of the Lost Zone, Palkia G Lv.X gets this spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Lugia GX. The main point of this card worth discussing is its Lost Purge GX attack. For 3 colorless energy, you can put your opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the Lost Zone. While only the GX attack mentions the Lost Zone, the attack is extremely powerful and helped to define Lugia GX's competitive niche. While this card was in the standard format, it saw play in all kinds of control stall decks. For these types of decks, having a way to remove any single problematic Pokemon your opponent had from play was incredibly valuable. For example, one common way to deal with stall decks and energy removal cards would be to attach as much energy to a single Pokemon as possible, so that you were able to attack with it even if excess energy got removed. Lost Purge GX against a Pokemon with a lot of energy attached to it possibly wiped out your opponent's chance at playing through your disruption pieces. Although 3 colorless energy is a steep cost for control decks since they use very few energy cards, if you play Lugia GX, you had ways to reduce the cost. One common inclusion in control decks was Counter Gain, a Pokemon tool card that reduced the attached Pokemon's attack cost by 1 colorless if you had more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Because control decks rarely ever took KOs against your opponent, they would be always up on remaining prize cards, which meant Lost Purge GX could be fully powered up with a single double colorless energy and a Counter Gain. Some tournament winning control decks would go as far as including a single double colorless energy as their only energy card just to use alongside Lugia GX. Even today, Lugia GX sees some play in expanded stall decks for the niche that Lost Purge GX provides. And at number 8, we have Mew Prime. For 1 Psychic Energy, this Pokemon's See-Off attack lets you put any 1 Pokemon from your deck straight into the Lost Zone. The reason you'd want to use See-Off was that Mew Prime's Lost Link Pokebody lets it use the attacks of all Pokemon in the Lost Zone. The best application of See-Off was to put powerful, evolving Pokemon that would usually be too inconsistent or slow to play into the Lost Zone. Once there, it was possible to use their attacks on a much easier to set up basic Pokemon. The best example of a previously terrible card seen play with Mew Prime was Rhyperior Lv.X. This card's Hard Crush attack lets you discard the top 5 cards of your deck and deal 50 damage for each energy discarded, all for no energy cost. While Rhyperior Lv.X was too clunky of a deck to use on its own due to functionally being a stage 3 Pokemon, Mew Prime made dealing out massive damage with Hard Crush extremely easy. If you discarded 3 energy cards of the attack, your Mew Prime with no energy attached to it took 1-hit KOs against any Pokemon in the metagame. After Rhyperior Lv.X rotated out of the standard format, control strategies built around See-Off emerged. After putting Muck into the Lost Zone, Mew Prime could then use Sludge Drag to force hard-to-retreat Pokemon into the active spot. Then, with the Crobat Prime there as well, the Mew player took advantage of the Skill Dive attack to slowly damage other Pokemon in play, while their opponents scrambled to find a way to get their useless Pokemon out of the active spot. Mew Prime was a super flexible Pokemon that saw play in many different decks due to its ability to copy the attacks of any Pokemon in the Lost Zone. And at number 7, we have Blacephalon GX. For only 2 energy, this Pokemon's Mind Blown attack lets you put any amount of fire energy attached to your Pokemon into the Lost Zone and deal 50 damage for each one you put there. Mind Blown is one of those attacks that doesn't seem like it would be that powerful, since you need to permanently get rid of your own resources from your side of the field in order to deal damage. Decks built around Mind Blown often play a variety of ways to accelerate energy onto the field to put into the Lost Zone, and often ran upwards of 17 fire energies to prevent the player from never running out of usable energy. Initially, Blacephalon GX was partnered with Naganadel, a Pokemon that could attach any basic energy card from your discard pile to itself with its charging up ability. If the player used consistency boosting items like Mysterious Treasure and Ultra Ball, that also helped to get fire energy into the discard pile. Blacephalon decks regularly set up multiple Naganadels to boost their damage by 150 without using their energy attachment from their hand. With said attachment, Mind Blown can deal 200 damage, enough to KO most basic and Stage 1 Pokemon GX. Since Blacephalon GX was an Ultra Beast, decks built around it could also use Beast Ring. If your opponent had exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining, you could use Beast Ring to attach any 2 basic energy cards from your deck to your Ultra Beast in any way you like. This gave Blacephalon decks the potential to set upwards of 6 to 8 energy, or 300 to 400 damage, straight from the deck on a key turn. Even after a Mind Blown, there would still be plentiful energy remaining on the field or in the discard pile going into the remainder of the game. With the Printer of Welder, these decks gained even more ways to quickly accelerate energy onto the board, and convert it into incredible damage. Blacephalon GX decks were capable of putting out massive damage quickly, immediately putting your opponents in a tough position due to how efficient Mind Blown was. And at number 6, we have the only supporter card on this list, Colress's Experiment, which lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 3 into your hand, and the rest into the Lost Zone. In a standard format with powerful draw supporters like Professor's Research being legal, a card that lets you pick the best 3 cards out of the top 5 of your deck seems unimpressive, especially since you will be putting the cards you don't take into a zone where they can never be gotten back from. What makes Colress's Experiment a powerful card is how many cards revolving around the Lost Zone were designed at the time of its release. When the Lost Origin expansion reintroduced the mechanic to the Pokemon TCG, a lot of Lost Zone cards in the set needed you to have a certain number of cards in your Lost Zone to be used. A card like Fantina, for example, requires you to have 10 cards in your Lost Zone for it to gain access to its damage reduction. With these cards' designs in mind, Colress's Experiment serves as a vital role in Lost Zone decks as a way to gain card advantage while putting multiple cards into the Lost Zone, and is the most important supporter card for these kinds of decks. And at number 5, we have the first item on this list, Mirage Gate. If you have 7 more cards in your Lost Zone, you can use this card to attach up to 2 basic energy cards of different types from your deck to your Pokemon in any way you like. Much like the previously mentioned Beast Ring, being able to attach up to 2 energy cards from your deck with an item card gives Lost Zone decks the ability to gain insane advantage. Normally, you can only attach 1 energy card from your hand per turn, so Mirage Gate lets you play out 3 times as much energy on your opponent per turn. Lost Zone decks take advantage of this card by quickly powering up strong attacking options like Giratina VSTAR or Radiant Greninja. Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken attack is especially powerful the earlier you can use it. The attack costs 2 water and 1 colorless energy to deal 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, with the downside of having to discard 2 energies attached to Greninja. With a lot of decks relying on low HP basic Pokemon to evolve into stronger attackers, an early Moonlit Shuriken powered up by Mirage Gate can put the Lost Zone players significantly ahead. Mirage Gate is a key component behind current Lost Zone's deck's competitive success. And at number 4, we have the just recently mentioned Giratina VSTAR. Both of its attacks reference the Lost Zone and are relevant towards its competitive success. For 1 Grass, Psychic, and Colorless energy, Lost Impact deals 280 damage, but forces you to put 2 energy attached to your Pokemon into the Lost Zone. For 1 Grass and 1 Psychic energy, its VSTAR Power Star Requiem knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon, but can only be used if you have 10 or more cards in your Lost Zone. When Giratina VSTAR released, it immediately saw success at the top competitive level alongside the other Lost Zone cards released in Lost Origin. Since most commonly played Pokemon VSTAR have 280 HP or less, Lost Impact easily takes knockouts for a little investment thanks to the energy acceleration provided by Mirage Gate. Lost Impact is such a powerful attack that Giratina VSTAR even sees play occasionally alongside Arceus VSTAR as another means to power up the attack. Lost Zone decks also took advantage of Lost Impact's downside. Since those decks usually had no issue getting 7 or more cards to the Lost Zone from Mirage Gate, putting energy into there through Lost Impact would set up the 10 or more cards needed to use Star Requiem. Having access to a move that can automatically KO your opponent's active Pokemon made playing the Giratina VSTAR awkward for many decks built around VMAX Pokemon, since if they ever got to 3 prize cards remaining, the Giratina player could just KO any VMAX Pokemon to win the game. Kicking off the top 3 Lost Zone cards, we have Magnezone Prime, a Stage 2 Pokemon with a fantastic Poke Power and attack. With its magnetic draw Poke Power, you can draw cards until you had 6 in your hand. For 1 electric and 1 colorless energy, you can use a Lost Burn, which deals 50 damage for each energy you put into your Lost Zone from your Pokemon, exactly like the previously mentioned Mind Blown. Since its release, decks using Magnezone Prime were commonplace at top tournament tables. Not only was Lost Burn an incredible attack capable of taking KOs against any Pokemon of the format by putting 3 energy into the Lost Zone, but Magnetic Draw provided decks using Magnezone Prime great card selection. While it was initially harder to accelerate energy for Lost Burn during Magnezone's standard format than it was for Blacephalon GX, the format was slow enough that you didn't need to use Lost Burn as soon as possible, instead slowly building up your energy on field to use Lost Burn on crucial turns. Decks built around Magnezone also benefited from Yanmega Prime, one of the best Pokemon cards at the time, being a very good partner to it. If you had the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, Yanmega Prime's Insight Pokebody removed its attack's energy costs. While attaching energy to Pokemon to set up Lost Burn later in the game, you could still attack with Yanmega. Even after getting rid of all of your energy cards to take a KO, Yanmega would most likely be able to attack next turn for free, since you could easily manipulate your hand size with Magnetic Draw, finding cards like Judge or Copycat that gave you and your opponent equal cards in hand. These two versatile Pokemon paired extremely well together. Magnezone Prime is also the only Pokemon that mentions a Lost Zone to have won a World Championship. When paired alongside Emboar's Infernal Fandango ability, you could attach as many basic fire energies from your hand as you liked during your turn before immediately drawing back up to 6 cards in hand with Magnetic Draw. If you had multiple Magnezone Prime in play, you could quickly go through your whole deck while attaching enough energy cards to use Lost Burn every single turn. It was this combination of Stage 2 Pokemon that would win the 2011 World Championship. Magnezone Prime deserves number 3 spot on this list for being a fantastic card and giving Pokemon Lost Zone its only World Championship win. And at number 2 on this list, we have Comfey. While this Pokemon is in the active spot, its flower selecting ability lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into your hand, and the other into the Lost Zone. Historically speaking, many Pokemon that have abilities that let you draw cards on basic Pokemon have been very competitively successful. Comfey continues this trend of meta success by being the primary enabler for Lost Zone decks alongside Colress's Experiment. With multiple Comfeys in play and ways to switch between them in the active spot with Switch Card, the player activating flower selecting can draw multiple cards while getting them closer to the 7 cards needed in the Lost Zone to use Mirage Gate. When combined with a way to put Comfey back into the hand, such as Scoop Up Net, you could draw multiple cards with the same Comfey. There's really not much else to say about this card other than it's a key component behind modern Lost Zone decks' meta viability. Having access to a basic Pokemon that can draw multiple cards boosts the consistency of these decks significantly, while at the same time putting cards into your Lost Zone to enable your powerful playmakers. Speaking of powerful playmakers, closing out his number 1 spot on this list, we have Sableye. This card's Lost Mine attack is the main reason Lost Zone decks in the current standard format see such widespread usage and success. For only 1 Psychic Energy, as long as you have 10 or more cards in your Lost Zone, you can put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. In a standard format full of evolving Pokemon, Lost Mine can easily take multiple KOs in a single turn. Even against Pokemon that can't be knocked out with Lost Mine, the fact you can spread the damage counters any way you want means you can set up some of your opponents a higher HP Pokemon to be taken out by one of your other attackers or future Lost Mines. While getting 10 cards in Lost Zone may seem difficult, as we've talked about before, it's actually pretty trivial with the combination of Comfey and Colress's Experiment. Sableye also pairs really well with Giratina VSTAR, since the format can take multiple KOs against weaker Pokemon at once, while the latter can KO any Pokemon Sableye matches up into. Lost Mine also helps spread around damage to ensure the Lost Impact can KO Pokemon like Gardevoir EX that would normally survive a hit. Sableye's power is also significantly improved due to the fact it's a single prize attacker. Single prize Pokemon that can regularly take multiple prize cards at once are generally hard to trade favorably into, since you will only take a single prize card for KOing their attacker after they might have taken 1 or 2 prize cards from you. Specifically for Sableye, traditional means of preventing benched Pokemon also don't work. Since Lost Mine deals damage by putting counters on Pokemon, a card like Manaphy with its water veil ability can't protect your weaker bench Pokemon. For some decks, playing around Sableye is simply very difficult, with some decks even being unviable entirely to a poor matchup into a Lost Zone deck using Sableye and a bevy of other attackers. As long as Sableye and its Lost Zone enablers remain in the format, they will be a top meta contender. Alright, and that's it for the Lost Zone cards. A lot of very good cards have been printed with this mechanic, so if you think we might have missed one, let us know down in the comments.